Reiss, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. Back into the double up S&C land.
Thanks for having me back. Yeah.
Jack, we've got to hold our ground.
Try our best, eh?
There we go.
Yeah, I like this divide here, actually.
Yeah. A bit of division.
Yeah.
Buckle in.
Do you want to talk about some S&C topics today? Testing really actually being quite high on my list of thoughts at the moment. We've talked about the role that testing plays quite a lot. But I think it would be interesting to share or to hear what you guys think about the important role that it plays. And I'm not sure how you feel about it from a club environment. But
Very
I find
interesting to me.
Yeah, interesting, important, but it can be a bit of a nuisance and it has some barriers and some friction there as well. I know that I've posed a question to you before, is testing important? And you said, well, how else do you know whether things are working? So like it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it's all about the work that you do, right?
Yeah, so there's a bit of a phrase where like if you're like not assessing, you're guessing. And it could be open a big old debate, which would be good fun. But yeah, for me, it's you've got to be gathering something from a physical point of view to show whether you are developing over time. Are your programs being effective as well? So I think sometimes, like you said, it's seen as a bit of a nuisance. From if I just put my S&C hat on, it's very important for me because I need to know what I'm doing is actually having an effect. So am I getting the adaptation that I've programmed for? Am I seeing that? Or am I just programming the athletes doing it? I'm not seeing a change. Because otherwise that's going to come and bite me later down the line when obviously the athlete hasn't got the physical qualities. Can it go too far the other way? I think so. Experience over time is collecting the data you need as opposed to just collecting mountains and mountains of data. Yeah. But yeah, I think I sort of share your view as it can be seen as a bit of a nuisance. So it's like, how do we as support staff minimize that friction? I guess I would say that's probably the big interest. Really.
And then the nuisance bit is purely the disruption to like regular training.
Yeah.
And that's precious time as well.
Yes.
But I absolutely see the value in it.
Yeah.
And I've done it before. I would do it again. But we can explore it. But Reiss, what's your thoughts on the role that testing plays for you in your work?
I think it's important, and I use it in my work with the gymnasts that I work with and the coaches that I work with. Same as Dan saying, really, like, I don't agree in testing for testing's sake, like just collecting the data for no reason. And I see it as gymnastics coaches, you guys also test just in a different way when it comes to building up for routines. If a skill is not ready in a half routine, you wouldn't then put it into a full routine. So that's how you test and build parameters around what goes into their routines. So you guys test as well. So it's just coming from a slightly different place.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think so. What I used to do, rightly or wrongly, in a club environment was I had a bit like my daily dozen, which I know you guys are familiar with. There was like a set of 10 exercises or something like that. And every month I would just simply test those exercises. But this was not S&C, this was gymnastics conditioning. Yeah. So it included like casts, press handstands. Again, a lot of it's come from the daily dozen or vice versa. And there was certain protocol required, of course. So, some of it was max reps, some of it was duration, for example, handstand hold or fastest rope climb and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it was great because it did allow us to see sort of progress, and it worked very early on when I first started at this club because it allowed us to see very quick changes. Yeah. And then, of course, like the law of diminishing returns, once that conditioning had kind of exhausted its effectiveness, started to see much less progress. Now, we enjoyed doing that, and there is a benefit to doing it. The problem I found was that you can never test under the same conditions all the time. So every month the gymnast is feeling different. It's a different time of the year. Sometimes you're building routines, sometimes you're not. Sometimes they've just come back from a holiday, so their data is going to be completely skewed versus 3 months later when they're now, let's say, competition fit again. So I just found some of that to be friction, which never... Because I'm a bit OCD about stuff, I was thinking, like, how much is this information a true reflection? And how much is it just like fitting into a calendar month for us and doing it 4 weeks apart? Like, it's logical for us, but is it the best way? Does that make sense? That was some of the friction for me. And like, I would still do it again because there is mileage, but those were the sorts of things that was going through my head. Let alone if you've got different coaches doing the testing because they've got different things that they're looking for. If a gymnast is off sick, if they've just been ill, it's like it kind of skews all the information.
So we call that like data hygiene. So like,
I like that term.
if you know,
Write that one down.
you're testing a long jump, and you allow certain things to go, but then the next month you're testing a long jump and you allow certain things to go. How much can you truly rely on that data? Well, if you were to push it into statistics and stuff like that, it would probably come out and say, "Oh, well, not at all." The effect that has and the significance is minimal. It's real world as well, though, in data. So people initially, when you start doing it, you're like, "Oh God, I have to do it like the lab model," which is very much like an F1 car, right? Like highly tuned. It's done in a lab for a journal, an academic journal. So it's really controlled. Then you start to like run it down this like gravel path, which is like a rally track, which is sport itself, training, tired, stressed, not slept, not eating, whatever that might be.
The first 3 exercises.
I think
Do the exercise in the wrong order as you did last time. Is that how much of an impact does that change it?
exactly.
Doing it at 6 p.m. versus 5 p.m.
You don't want to do it that day. Like, I don't know if you've ever done something you don't want to do. Sometimes you're not going to do it to the best of your ability.
And your effort is lower. So.
So I think it starts to move into the question of, is there a way that we can do regular monitoring, which is something completely different. So we're monitoring fatigue and power output on a more regular basis. Okay. So what I mean by that is, are there some tests that we could do regularly that are sort of frictionless, that would allow us to check that regularly? So something like what we would call a counter movement jump, which is like it's a squat jump effectively with no pause at the bottom for height. I'm really lucky because I have equipment that would tell me the metrics of what's going on.
Force plates, yeah?
Yeah, force plates, yeah. But, you could use a broad jump if you were going to be rudimentary with it, because you would start to see some effect. So when this athlete is fatigued, their nervous system isn't where it should be. Therefore, they're not jumping as far. That's still giving you information, but that's monitoring, isn't it? Testing is more... I'm trying to develop this specific quality within the athlete at a certain time in the year. So, for example, during competition time, we're trying to develop things like contact time off the floor. Is there a way that we can test that? Well, there is definitely a way I can test that, but are there ways we can look at, like, are we developing that quality, yes or no?
So how frequent would you... Because I know you're monitoring in an ideal... If we look at gold standard, would be a daily thing, right? Yeah. But you're testing, how frequent would you do that?
So I do it in blocks. So whatever my training block is. So if I have a strength block, for example, that may be lasting 12 weeks, I would potentially be having like maybe a little check-in point halfway through there. Or I would wait till the end of the block, look at the effect it's had, and then see where do we push on through there. Yeah. I think having it scheduled in a plan is the key thing, because it's so easy just to... If you don't, it goes missing quite quickly. And then it feels like friction because I'm coming in and disrupting training. But over the years, I've tried to gather what I need without getting in the way. So, for example, when I go to a club, it's like monthly or every other month, while the athletes are warming up, I'll do their jumps. And then by the time jumps are finished, the athletes have done their testing and monitoring for the day, unless there's a particular case I need to look at, because I would find it hard from a coach to have umbrage with that, where if they're about to vault and I'm saying, oh, I just need so-and-so to come my way, then you're starting to...
That's disruption.
Yeah.
Ruining the flow.
Yeah.
I think it also making sure that it's not random.
Yeah.
Like, in terms of like, let's say building up for routines, you don't randomly put in a control comp. It's like planned out. So it's the same principle, making sure that it's not random, making sure that it is planned.
Yeah. It's got to have a purpose, isn't it? So there's an intent behind it rather than just chuck it in there for the sake of it.
Yeah.
I wonder whether... So, again, there's pros and cons to it all. So my thought with daily monitoring goes to when that's that mundane or repetitive, I should say, at what point do you lose the stimulus of like effort? So the athlete's like, oh, here we go again, like do my broad jump. And you... Because surely that test is... That monitoring, however we call it, is only useful if you actually get them to perform it at max effort.
Yeah, I think that comes down to the individual delivering it. So have you created that education piece around the athlete? So this allows me to support you and have conversations when you're tired with the head coach. So this is here to help you.
Yeah,
it's not particularly here to help me. The other thing is I think if you have a gymnast that doesn't really want to put effort into 3 jumps, I think you've got a bit of a bigger cultural program because they've got to vault, they've got to do beam routine. Like, I'm not being funny. Like some of that stuff isn't particularly varied. I think if you've got to do a battery of testing, I could see how that could become quite jarring.
If you did it regularly.
Yeah. And I think there are days, don't get me wrong, I've had athletes come up to the plate this year, so it's like force plates, and they will sort of say, like, I don't want to do my jump today, and that's absolutely well within your rights as well.
Fine.
Yeah.
You don't want to be monitored, you don't want to be judged today, you just don't want any of that. And like I always make that really clear as well. Of like, it's here to help you, but if this isn't going to help you today, because if this score goes down, it's going to put you in the frame of, oh God, this has gone terribly.
That's a form of monitoring, though, right?
Yeah.
And being able to say, oh, no, not today.
Yeah.
That's signs for something's changed or something might be going up, going on. So,
and then at least the more conversational pieces. So the big thing with the monitoring is we're not always looking for it to go up. It should be down at certain times of the year. Yeah. If it's down when it should be trending upwards, it's also a conversation for you guys, because it's gymnast X, Y, or Z is exhibiting signs of this, but it's early in the session.
Yeah.
So I can come to you before the vault session and maybe prep you that there is like down regulation maybe. Yeah. So when they're tired,
which is totally acceptable.
Yeah, and then you're not finding that out 2 or 3 volts in.
Yeah.
So you can go, oh, I've seen that in 2 volts. Let's change this quick. So then we can not burn the day with the athlete. But I think it can go too far the other way. So I sit in a bit of a weird camp where I do it, but I think let's not ever lose like the human insight bit as well. So the athlete's jumping, I'm asking them like, how's your day? How's this feeling? Yeah. It's my opportunity to check in with the athlete, but also like the conversation I would have or have had with you in the past is like, how is she doing? What are you seeing?
Yeah.
What you normally find is the coach is telling me what I'm seeing as well, but then all I'm doing is actually putting like quite a concrete label on it. Yeah. So
but there also could be a scenario where their jump data was low.
Yep.
But actually they go to vault and they're hitting the vaults that day. I guess
it's a great day.
Yeah. It's just, it happens, doesn't it? I guess.
And sport is king. So if the vault's going well that day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy days.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I think that the data over time is the important thing. So it's important for the viewers to understand from an expectation perspective that you're not going to see, and you've mentioned that you are going to see it come down. You don't expect things to go up all the time.
No.
It would be lovely if that was the case. It'd be quite easy, wouldn't it? But it's the case of over a longer period of time, the general trajectory should be an upwards curve as opposed to a huge spike, for example, up and obviously a huge downward spike as well.
Yeah, so we're looking at 10% changes is what we would class as significant. So if things have dropped by like 5%, it's not classed as like a significant. And then when it starts to drop to 10% or below, that's when we start to really prick our ears up and be like, this is interesting. Or if it starts to trend downwards.
Yep.
Like you said, it can't go up every week. If it went up every week, you'd have a world record jumper by the end of the year.
Possible.
Everyone's touched the ceiling.
NBA would be calling.
Yeah. So another benefit to this, of course, is if you've got benchmarks to say, right, when they're fully fit, this is what our scores were.
Yes.
And then, unfortunately, there's an accident or an injury that happens. You've now got your markers to go, well, this is how they were scoring when they were at full fitness. So this is now, we need to get back to, this is a minimum threshold to get back to where he is now at this point. Yeah. Whereas if you don't have that data, then you've got no way of going, well, this is how strong they were, or this is how far off we are on the return to fitness plan.
Exactly.
So just having those markers in place. Yeah. There's lots of benefits. It's just being able to deliver it in a friction-free way, isn't it? Or friction.
Yeah.
Because you can't maintain a peak, can you? Like, it's impossible.
No, and you can't go up and up and up.
No.
You can maybe do it once or
stay
twice
at that intensity is not feasible. No. So there will be a downward curve, which is completely part of the process.
Yeah.
I guess another benefit would be you can set targets around the numbers which are tangible, so you can actually say, so for you it might be that you're currently doing a 1 rep max on this weight, for example. Let's see if we can do 3 reps of that weight, or your 1 rep max goes up. In a technicals, but it could be you've done 7 press to handstands, but your target in a month's time is to be able to do 10. And so it gives them something tangible to understand really success and failure, or as that hard work kind of is it working?
So I probably did about 3-4 years without like that big equipment as well. It's probably worth saying. So it's easy to sit there and go, well, you can.
Well, I remember your excitement when you called me up and you're like, I've got these plates coming, right? These portable plates.
Okay, I'm a nerd, yes. But like, you can look at 24 marks in a jump, but there was a time where I was doing like a counter movement jump or a broad jump, and then I would be looking at like capacity work in like, so what is your endurance in your hamstrings and your calves and your pushing and your pulling, and we were trying to gather as much of that. We were just trying to use what we could, and I guess it's whatever's feasible for you and whatever's workable. So if you can only do 3 jumps and you don't think that's going to get in the way, great. If you're a club that would like to do more, do more. Yeah. It's whatever you find as a personal coach is going to interfere. If you're lucky enough to have some people come in and do some work for you, it's like ask them to guide you on that a little bit as well, but make sure.
Different.
But for me, it is important that you guys understand the numbers or the metrics or whatever it is that we're testing. It's not just this thing that is kept by the coach, because when it is, you lose your interest real quick.
Yeah. You're testing for testing's sake, like you said.
Yeah.
And it goes into my notebook and I do nothing with it.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Pointless.
Unless you see the numbers go down, then you start to have a conversation with us.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a bit like training journals and diaries. They've got obviously a very good relevance, or collecting RPE scores, rate of perceived exertion and things like that. I think there might be a lot of clubs doing it, but I'm not really sure how many are actually using that information.
Yeah.
Because they're just collecting data and then there's nothing done with it.
And then it comes back to that old adage, as if you're doing that and you're not looking at it or checking it, it's like actually maybe your best hit is just a real good conversation when they first come in. How are you feeling instead of a journal? So it's if you're using it. And I would say over the years I've been slimming mine down, not adding to. And maybe looking a little bit more individualized into like why is that person jumping higher is where I've been going with it, as opposed to, their jump height has gone up, great. Why has it gone up? Because that's the thing that I have to change, that is going to enhance how the gymnast performs. It's not that they're jumping higher because we don't know why. There's lots of reasons an athlete can jump higher. They can accelerate down quick. They can accelerate up quick. They can spend less time at the bottom. They can hardly bend. They can, so there's a lot of things that you've got to look into. But the big thing is translating it to performance. So.
Yeah, and driving decision making.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, this is going to be less relevant, still important, but less relevant to younger kids. But then again, when you start to get to more of a serious training level, I think some of this stuff will drive decision making. I mean, previous high level athlete that I've worked with, their floor and vault program was governed by their ankle range that day. So one of the monitoring things that they did was they came in every day and we did knee to wall before warm up and knee to wall after warm up. And
exactly the same
it was unbelievable how they had like a 3 centimeter difference from day to day, depending on what their floor and vault program was the day before. So they did a big floor program. Then the next day they'd come in with stiff ankles. So I'd go, like, we're not going to work on floor today. I want that to settle down, because now we're heading into hot water. If you have a short landing today, you've already got some inflammation there.
And also just how that effective joint angle can change. So if your dorsiflexion, your knee to wall, has got worse, it changes the angle of like you're tumbling on the floor.
Absolutely, you take off
because you can't be pushing your knee where you want to go in order to load to get out of it. So but again, it's really important for the athlete to know that as well. So if you're doing this, they're not like, why aren't you letting me do this? It's going to change how you are performing gymnastically. And what we're trying to do is refine you at this moment in time gymnastically. So,
but in that case, it's just a case of we'll do the numbers, but we're not doing the floor. We'll do it on the track. You might even increase the numbers, but you might do them in a different environment, soft landing, because like you still need volume. And I think this is part of the art of high-level coaching as well, is when you need to get volume, but you have to sometimes be quite creative about the way that you do it.
100%.
Safely.
Safely and without the mundanity of literally saying, you've got 6 routines today. It's actually, right, you've got 3-4 routines. We're going to do a couple of each half. And we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and putting all that together creates a pretty high training volume. But you're not just smashing routine after routine after routine, which is like pretty difficult from a psychological perspective. You'll know this better than all of us as an international athlete. It's that I think is key. And in this case, you've got stiff ankles. We still need volume from you. We can't not do volume because of the phase that we're working in. So let's think about how we can do volume in a way that doesn't compromise your body today.
That's safety.
That's like human insight part of it as well, isn't it? Of like, rely on the data, but don't lose the part of coaching that is what we all love, which is the bit that you can't put a number on. So you've made a call there.
Intuition,
and that's what makes good coaches, and those are the coaches you want to work with, are the ones that can have a bit of human insight about what they're doing as well.
It's being realistic as well, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, your competition might be on a cold Sunday morning.
When your ankles are tight.
Feeling very tight. And very unprepared. And yet you've never been in that situation during your training. So we have to be able to step into that potentially dangerous area, but as long as it's monitored, measurable, safe.
Calculated risk. So you made a good point, which is that some days you do have to expose them to, you can do your floor routine today, and you know your ankles are a bit tighter, but it's calculated. It's driven by experience, it's driven by intuition.
If you've never been there, they won't know how to respond to that.
You're absolutely right. And that's I'm glad that you raised that.
I would say challenge your coaches on that as well, like your support staff. So what do we do if we do get to competition and our ankles are feeling really stiff? Is there something we can do acutely on the day, because it's game time?
To mobilise, for example.
To mobilise short term and get them where we need to go. We've had that with an athlete before where leading into British, they were doing stuff in the back room where it was literally getting range for the day. And it was a discussion that had gone on for weeks and weeks and weeks. We primed it that we got there and it had shortened up, but we weren't scrambling. It was like, we know what the plan is, so that's what we're going to do. Rather than being in the back room trying to find a band and trying to
pure panic.
Yeah, exactly.
Comes down to that preparation, right?
Yeah, the athlete actually knew the routine. So she just went away and did her ankle mobility routine.
Brilliant.
And part of preparation is having a plan B. To go, you know what, if we do all that mobilisation and for whatever reason it's not happening, or you warm up on floor and it's not happening, what do we fall back to? And so, you take out your, I'm thinking high level example, you take out your double and we just do a double back. Like it's fine. Like that's a stepping stone moving forwards. But
it's that or you don't do it, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
So
but going with a plan B
then
stops there from being panic on the day. And we've all been there where you haven't done the plan B. You tell the athlete, I'm really sorry, I have to take this out, and the look on their face, instant failure. It impacts their entire performance from there because they just feel like they've
confidence drops.
Yeah, exactly.
It's important to practice that plan B though in the gym as well.
Yeah.
Because I've been in situations before where I've been at a competition, warm up's not going so well. Talking to my coach, it's like, okay, right, we'll take this skill out. It's like, but I've in the last 8 weeks haven't done any routines without that skill.
Yeah.
So that completely changes how I feel within that routine. So that was one thing that I learned, was to practice a plan B routine just in case this isn't going well. The bar feels weird. The floor's a little bit harder than it should be or whatever. So it's really important that that's also practiced.
And the conversations take place with the parent and with the kids beforehand, which is like, just so you know, this is our intended routine. If everything goes well and the stars align, we'll do this planned routine. However, quite often things don't quite go to plan. We've got all the distractions, disruptions and differences which will occur on the day. As a result of that, this is our plan B. I just want you to know that doesn't mean that we failed. It means that we've just that plan B is the best that we were able to do on that day, and so don't overreact. Against being that neutral person against that, you don't get too excited or too demoralised.
Because it also works the other way, right? You can have plan A plus.
Where
if your flow feels great, now connect those two skills, and so it also works that way. The other way. So
they can't think this because they failed.
Yeah, exactly.
So they're second guessing you at that point. They're second guessing themselves. This is not because you failed. It's because we've done this on purpose. It's okay.
Definitely.
Plan B is not. It might need a better term even than plan A and B. I don't know. But it can't be because you've not done your job. This is what we've planned for. It's fine.
Everyone's going to use those different avenues and escape routes as well from time to time, aren't they?
Yeah, needed.
Short interruption. If you're a head coach, club owner, manager, or leader, check out our high performance health check for a free insight into how well your club's operating within our 6-category framework. Head to nickruddock.com/health check to take our 10-minute assessment. We'll send you the results straight to your inbox. Back to the episode. Just coming back to the strength part of things. I think we often think about the best way of protecting athletes is to reduce. So it's like reduce volume, reduce numbers. But again, there's a threshold, and we talk a lot about, or we have done a lot, talked about thresholds and dials on this podcast because it's never cut and dry. But there are, or sometimes the best way of creating a robust athlete is actually to expose them to more volume. So that they don't go to competition or do the competition process, and then all of a sudden they've got a lot more impacts, a lot more numbers, and that way, that big acute spike is what caused them to get injured in the first place. So there's like an optimal dose of volume that we need to expose them to, but I don't think it's always about stripping stuff away.
No.
They've got to be exposed to the volume in order to tolerate the volume.
Yeah.
You can't build them essentially if you haven't exposed them to that in the first place.
We call it like increasing your trainability.
Trainability.
Yeah. So if we, like, and I was trying to say we, because it's fully joint effort, if we can increase the amount that you can tolerate as an athlete without it having an adverse effect on you, adverse sounds really dramatic, as in adverse being it makes you tired or it makes you slow. It's not that,
and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's not that you get injured. Yeah. If we can do that, it means that you can train more consistently at a higher quality. And gymnastics is a high frequency sport. And what I mean by that is you train very regularly without much rest in between for quite long duration. So the key thing is year on year, are there ways of us increasing that trainability? And we know that obviously if we improve your force output, strength, that's one way of increasing that, because the action that you do has less of a cost on your body than the previous year.
So each rep is less taxing for you to perform, therefore you can do more of those reps. Yeah.
And that's in the ideal world. So that's maybe more like that F1 car model. The rally track is obviously year on year. Things also get harder.
Yeah.
So you've got an athlete getting stronger that has less cost on the thing that they needed last year.
Okay.
And they have a new thing normally coming around the corner that's about to rock their world.
Yeah.
But like the F1 car analogy.
Yeah.
I've heard the same thing with a Ferrari versus a tow truck.
Yeah.
Do you want to train like a tow truck?
Yeah.
Or do you want to like dial it in so that when it does come to the final performance, that's when it all comes together.
You use it.
Yeah.
Your body won't last if you train like a tow truck all day, every day. It's
and
impossible.
And that comes down to your trainability as well. So if you have high trainability, you can handle more work. Don't get me wrong, there's also some phenomenal gymnasts that I've been involved with that do have lower levels of trainability.
Yeah.
You've just got to be way smarter with what you're doing and how you're doing it. And I think that's the harder piece. Increasing the trainability is pretty good. Consistency over time, buying in the process. When you've got someone who has low trainability with no interest in getting high trainability, how do we then manage that conversation with the coach and the support staff and the athlete to still get them through that process?
Makes sense.
Becomes a workload topic as opposed to a physical output topic.
I think a lot of coaches are intimidated by this as a general topic.
Yes.
And I understand why.
Yeah.
I mean, I still get intimidated by the periodization side of things.
It's tough.
And I think that as a result of the worry about getting it wrong or the ease of getting it wrong with workload management, with choosing the right exercise selection, the right time of year, when to push, the ratio of physical to technical, like there's so much in it.
Yeah.
It does become intimidating.
Yeah.
So I always just opt for simplicity.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know we have a lot of conversations that makes things easier for me, but I just think, right, if I don't understand the complexity, so I'll be able to deliver simplicity, but really effectively. So I'm going to strip away the complexity, but do a very good job at simple. So I'm going to make sure they move well. I'm going to make sure that there's great effort in everything. I'll give them good recovery time. Like if you're nailing the basics. And I always think that, like in life, we say, like, if we can eat well, sleep well, stay hydrated, brush your teeth and all that sort of stuff. If you can nail the foundations, then like that's a great starting point.
Cover those bases.
Yeah, but most of us are like on caffeine because we haven't had a good enough sleep. So we've like, I know, okay. But we've like
caffeine.
Natural caffeine, okay. But we might have too many cups of coffee in a day and we're having like late nights, so it affects our sleep. And then we're taking supplements but not eating well. And so it's like you're missing the foundations and trying to cover it up.
Yeah.
And I use that analogy a lot to think about, like, in the gym, like, are we trying to patch something up here? Or are we really just nailing, give them some recovery time, challenge them, give them recovery time on the other side, choose smart surfaces, nail the foundation,
isn't it? I know we keep going back to consistency over intensity, but intensity is under rest. You can go as intense as you want as long as you're recovering.
As long as you're recovering.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And obviously that sounds simple, but the difficulty in gymnastics is a lot of these athletes are doing 6 days a week or 5 days a week. So, and in between that time, they're at school if they're young kids. And so it's like, is it true recovery times? Whereas professional athletes might have the benefit of being able to put their feet up a bit more, or get more meals in throughout the day to recover. All of that kind of stuff, rather than having a little lunchbox and eating in the car on the way to the gym, getting home and doing homework, and it's trying to make the best of a somewhat difficult situation with young kids doing a very busy schedule.
Yeah. I think S&C coaches probably have built a rod for their own back over the time as well by discussing things in a complex manner because they understand it in a complex manner, and then discussing it with coaches and athletes and then turning them off from it. Where I think the skill is being able to convey, look at it and understand it in what I want to look at, and then be able to convey it to a head coach who understands it through their lens. And more importantly, actually, like the athlete in front of you as well. And there's like 3 conversations you've got to have. I can't just say, like, I've improved your reactive strength index and expect you to know what I mean, and the gymnast who isn't even at GCSEP level to understand what that is as well. And I think we've previously been at fault for that by coming in and spewing jargon all over the coaching process and then expecting everyone to learn all of our language. I think you need to learn some, don't get me wrong.
In the same way that we like you to, like, you know what Yurchenko is these days, Kachev and stuff.
I say it quite a bit.
Big, impressive sounding names for things, people won't take you seriously. Yeah,
exactly. I think that's the key thing of, like, there is a bit of give and take. Like, yes, I have to come in and learn like loads of Russian names for things, and you do have to learn some new words. That's okay. It's just me not using jargon for jargon's sake. It's something I've removed out of my coaching years ago, because for that reason, it was turning coaches off. As in, they weren't interested, and then I'm losing probably what is a huge part of my job, as opposed to exercise prescription. We were getting away from adaptation focus, and we were getting into, are you choosing the right exercise? And it's like, it's the adaptation that drives the success for the athlete, not that they split squat instead of Bulgarian split squat. Doesn't make a difference.
But I wonder, when coaches are trying to periodize and they're having the first stab at it, that any success that comes from that is purely that they've actually just put a structured plan in place.
100%.
It's not necessarily like their timing of the periodization. I'm going to load here, and because I think a lot of that, I think we sometimes believe, I'm not talking about your world here, I'm talking about our world as technical coaches, because we don't have that expertise to the same extent that these guys would about planning and over long periods, that it doesn't work as effectively as we think it might be, because there's so many variables that are affecting the effectiveness. So I'm going to load you, doing all this loading here and workload management on your physical, but I've just smashed you on routines all day anyway, which has just counteracted this plan.
You've just doubled up on.
So like, is it just the fact that you put a plan in place for once and then therefore had a bit of structure? Like, of course you're going to see an upwards trajectory of performance.
It's like anything, right?
There's structure.
Yeah, the first step is create structure. So
even bad structure will be no structure, I think.
Massive.
And that's why the Daily Dozen has been so effective. And there's literally like tens of thousands of coaches and athletes doing a Daily Dozen.
I was going to go back to that
every single day.
Yeah, we measure our Daily Dozen every day.
Right.
Because it's just caster handstands, press handstands. We can measure that every day. And then actual testing we do periodically, but rarely.
Sure.
Yeah.
And it's, I hear from coaches all the time. I just had someone in Canada, they've popped into a few different clubs in Canada. They're doing some consultancy, and she went, I've been into 3 different clubs this week and they've all got the Daily Dozen in place. That's over in Canada. And it's like, there's thousands of athletes. There's several Olympians that I've worked with that are still doing a Daily Dozen. But it's the most simple program. It's just this structure to it. The benefit is it's repetition laid out in a structured way with no friction at all. There's no rocket science. I'm not a genius for making it up. It's like press the handstands, cast the handstands, core, but it's
We've used it as a bit of a struggling to think of the term, but like maybe accountability as well, because we're not always monitoring these exercises. We try to, but sometimes it's just not possible. And if you have been genuinely doing these exercises properly as part of your program every day for the last half a year, and they haven't improved, or you still can't do your leg lift with straight legs, then you haven't been doing it properly. I promise you haven't, because they would be better than they were back then.
So absolutely.
I think about it a lot, because we spoke when it was first sort of happening, wasn't it? Right, like writing on napkins and all sorts. So
literally sat in a pub up the north
from conception
over a cheesecake, going like, "This is the octagon." Remember me drawing the octagon?
It was wild. Like we literally thought about it. So I've been mulling this over for like, do I like this? Don't I like it? What does it do? And I've come closer and closer to refining it down to, I think it's microdosing. So I think the Daily Dozen is microdosing. So you're doing work every time you train that you know is going to help you in small amounts, And I think the reason it works is because you're doing it frequently.
Yeah.
And that sounds really simple, but if you have 2 big S&C sessions, this is me tripping myself up because that's what I program. If you have 2 big S&C sessions, but you miss one in the week, you've missed 50% of your chance for a physical block. Where if you do daily dozen every day, you are getting that over a frequency of a week. Even if you miss one session, the percentage change is less.
Yeah.
Should you then be driving home that you shouldn't be missing your big block of physical? Yeah, but with the daily dozen, that's the thing I've come down to is I think it's really good microdosing for your athletes, and they do it every day. Yeah. And if they miss one, the percentage loss in physical prep you've done in the week is minimal. Yeah. Where if you lose 45 minutes that you've done twice a week, you've lost 50% of your conditioning, and then you've got big problems.
Yeah. It's like a self-readiness score as well, isn't it? For as an athlete, it's like you do those 12 exercises. Okay, how do I feel after those 12 exercises? How do I feel during those 12 exercises? That gives me an idea of how I'm going to feel within my session.
Yep.
Yeah, because we've all been there, right? You've turned up to your session like raring to go.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, I feel awful.
Yeah.
I felt fine coming in, but I did my first exercise and went, ugh.
Yeah,
horrible.
Or the other way, right? You feel horrible, or you do those 12 exercises, for example, and you're like, right, I'm ready now. I feel ready to go.
Yeah.
So it's like a readiness regulator.
Yep.
Yeah. A good coach would watch that as well, right?
Reiss's readiness regulator.
Reisse is ready.
There's my 3 words.
Nailed it. But I think a good coach would watch that as well. So knowing your athlete, this also seems sluggish today. Oh, they normally do 5 of those and they got 4 today. It's not like you've gone down. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So then before the big stuff comes around, you've already started to formulate a little bit of a plan of what's going on. You've normally got me in your ear as well, being like, so-and-so's jump's also going up or down. I think it all builds a picture of what's going on with that athlete prior to training. Mm-hmm. Got to remember, like, they've literally come from school, some of these kids. So it's like, you've got to build a picture of them as quick as you can.
Yeah.
Otherwise, your plan's just going to get smashed to death.
Yeah.
Because they're tired or stressed or happy and excited. You don't know, do you?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So. A lot of kids experience all of those things in one session. They'll come in tired, and they'll become stressed, and they'll become happy, and then they'll be tired again before they go home.
There's some days, to be honest.
So, no, really, really interesting stuff. And I think, like I said, it is a big topic, physical prep. I always say that on the podcast. There is
huge.
I think if coaches can understand what world-class physical prep looks like, it's probably going to have the most significant impact on their coaching, because it becomes very close to technical coaching then. I mean, physical coaching is technical. We know that. Yeah. But the better they become physically, the more it impacts the low-hanging fruit and the shape work and the quality, the general movement vocabulary or movement competency, I should say. I always say, if coaches are like struggling with the next step, I'm just like, just look at your physical prep. Yeah. If you can be better with your athletes physically, then it will have the biggest difference technically. Yeah. Your kids aren't doing a giant. Like, don't look to the drills that you do and look at the shapes that they're making, the strength behind those shapes, all of that. So
where is that breakdown in shape as well? So it's not like, they can't giant, so let's fling loads at it. It's like if they're constantly like dropping into an arch when they're going round, which is something you commonly see. It's like, we need to put some more core in, like this, like anti-extension movement to help them get around the bar. So it's just like using that and going, okay, the arching lots, how do I stop any athlete falling into extension or arching? Yep. It's a Google away, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And then you pop that stuff in to what you're doing. But I fully agree. I've been fortunate enough to go into clubs that it's been really well received and really well done when I'm not there. And you can see the change. Like in the gymnastics, I'll spend the time watching the gymnastics as well. And I'm like, they're running faster. They're spending less time on the floor. That's not data. I'm just watching it from that human. This is starting to look neater. They look stronger. Yeah. They don't look tired. Yeah. They're not crawling around the gym at the end of the day. Yeah. That's like the human insight side of it, where it's just like, that's just me using my eyes of like, this stuff's kind of working. Hopefully the coach sees it as well, right? Because I think you guys can be a bit critical of that as well sometimes. Yeah,
but by having a break and coming back in, sometimes it looks more obvious to you.
Yeah,
whereas
you see it every day.
The daily progression is so small, incremental. Yeah. You don't tend to see it. Just kind of happens.
Yeah, I always try and point that out. I'm always like, because I think, like you said, I get that snapshot and you guys get that slow grading. I think it's really important that someone comes in and like, oh, it's looking next.
I've seen it different.
Or be honest the other way as well. Yeah, like I'm seeing this as well, but there's a difficulty in this.
I talked about supplements earlier. I think this is key as well. So you can take supplements for 2 months and not have any idea whether they're being effective or not. Maybe there's the placebo effect there, but I think the supplement industry struggles with trying to get people to consistently take their products because there's no measure. I mean, there might be a measure, but in some of them, it's like, right, I'm taking this vitamin D, like I don't feel any different, but it's supposed to be working. I think sometimes with physical prep, you can be doing the same programs and things, and maybe the technical coaches can't actually see a difference, and it's going to take a while. It's going to take months.
Yeah,
it's difficult for them to buy into this program, and it's like, well, you know, what's this hip bridge helping with? Like, I mean, they can't do anything else extra. They're not adding loads of weight, for example, and it's them understanding the transaction there, or I guess just the benefit of doing it, the benefit of taking the supplements in this case. Do you know what I mean?
It is a supplement to the training, isn't it? That's all it is.
It's so
essential supplement.
I do think that's a challenge that you guys have is getting the buy-in.
Yeah.
Because we don't know sometimes the errors or the gaps in an athlete's program until it's too late.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they're 14, their landing mechanics are all over the place, and they've busted their knee.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. But like, actually, what should I have been doing when they were 10 years old that would have stopped this?
Yeah.
But it's too late now. I've just gone, now I should have been doing my single leg landing mechanics or my single leg strength.
Yeah. It's a horrible hindsight.
It starts off with that conversation when you first start working with that club or coach, right? Understanding what success looks like and what the journey can look like with that athlete or with what you're doing. So I think that's where that initial conversation is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah. Get clarity. And I think working lower down the club as well. So that like performance pathway. So you don't work with every child, but having some exposure. So when I go to the club, the idea is that you sort of work with the kids that are further at the top, but also the ones that are going to come through. So it's a lot harder to remedy a problem than to fix it at the source, which is when they're little. So making sure that when they come to me, they can actually get their hands over their head without arching their back. When you're trying to fix that in a 14-year-old, it's hard. If you're just doing it along the way, the idea is that this little batch of little miniature heroes comes through the other side, just being able to do that, and we're not having to put those things in place.
Proactive versus reactive.
It all comes down to being proactive.
Yeah, and just checking it and seeing. But I understand it's also hard because it's not your full-time job. It's not where your education has landed on you. There's a lot of resources out there.
But you said that earlier, and this is the problem. Well, not the problem, but they're not looking at these resources. They're out there.
Yeah.
You can, like you said, you can Google it. If it's something that you're struggling with.
I don't know. I think there's...
But then there's a lot.
Yeah, I think there's a lot. And I think that the biggest barrier is intimidation and complexity.
Yeah.
Like, let's be honest, most coaches do not come from an academic background.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, most coaches have been to school, and I don't mean this in a derogatory way, I'm exactly the same. Go to school, you're in the gym, you fall in love with coaching, and like you're not necessarily coming from academia.
Yeah.
You're not used to studying textbooks like beyond what maybe school was. You might not have gone to university and done degrees or college if this is an American audience watching. And I think it's quite a big ask. Or maybe that's the wrong terminology. It's quite a challenge, I think, for people that don't live in that world. Now, for you, you've studied S&C and done...
For 4 years.
You've done it at a very high level. You've got your degrees and all that sort of stuff. So it's probably normal for you.
Yeah.
You study research. You go to conferences where it's really detailed about papers and stuff. Like, I don't do that.
No.
I don't do that as a coach. And so seeing graphs and charts and talking about periodization, block this and block that, it's intimidating.
Yeah,
I'm
understand
happy to admit it. I mean, I digest the stuff that I need, and I'm better off picking up the phone to you and going, well, Dan, you deal with all the complexity and tell me what I need to do.
Yeah,
and I'll understand it.
Yeah, I think, but then if you ask me, what do I want from you guys? I don't want you to have that level of knowledge because I need it from the technical point of view, because that's what's going to bring us success at the end of the day. I could build the strongest, most stable gymnast in the world, but if that technical coach isn't driving their model, their standards, their skills, putting that time in, ultimately the work that I do falls really short of the line.
Yeah.
So it's easy for me to say because I work with coaches side by side. I think if you're a coach who's on their own, I think that is hard because you are going to have to step out. I think you go down that route of make it really simple. So are there ways of testing them where we know if they jump further, they've probably got stronger?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's really rudimentary, so I'm not presenting that anywhere anytime soon. But like rough and ready, that is a good indicator that the stuff you're doing is working. If it's not getting better year on year, you maybe need to start to look at some more
Something
things.
else, yeah.
But the overwhelm is massive. Like, there's even times where I'm like, this is too much information, and I struggle with it from a personal point of view of, do I put more information out into space that there's already loads of information? I don't know where you like, stand on that.
I think for me, like, in terms of like putting stuff out there, I try and make it as simple as possible to be that resource.
You do that really well as well.
Yeah, to try and be that resource so that somebody can come to my page or whatever and be like, oh, if I do this, it can help with this. Okay, I'm going to go and do that. Or this is another option, this is another option. So I personally try and put that out there and make it as simple as possible.
Rather than adding to the massive reservoir of complexity that already exists out there. So.
Yeah, similar. I think I'll always like try and explain the why.
Yeah.
Like always.
And always trying to relate it back to gymnastics, right? Like if you do this, this will happen, it can help this.
Yeah.
So that it's easier for it's our way of communicating to you guys, so it all marries up. So it's not like you say putting up loads of information that is a bit like, oh my God, wow, I don't know how to digest this. Yeah. So always relating it back to gymnastics, which is hard on social media sometimes because it's such a small snippet. You get a certain amount of characters and all that type of stuff.
Yeah.
So
and the reality is, like, some of that information is meant for social media.
Yeah.
Some of it has to be delved into more detail, whether that's a webinar, a discussion. You get someone in, you pick up the phone to someone. There has to be more sources of information about something like that. But like you said, that's our job to go away and sometimes dig into the weeds of that stuff. I've just been sent 14 papers this week, for example. It's just like, oh man, it's not my favorite thing to do anymore, but it's necessary because then I can come and pose questions to you guys that might challenge your practice to get the best out of the gymnast. Or you might go, no, it's not of interest. And that's also okay, because I've got to remember that it's a supporting role. It's not a leading role in the program. Doesn't mean it's subservient, but it's very like, I'm here to support the journey of you guys and the athletes as opposed to driving my message home because I've read this research and you don't understand it.
Yep. Love it. Some good topic there, guys. A lot in it. And hopefully we've helped maybe some of the audience to think about,
Hope so.
Well, reducing their overwhelm and understanding that actually a lot of people are feeling this way and maybe give people a bit more clarity. So thanks for everyone's input, as always. Another great episode. And again, looking forward to the next one.
Yeah. Thanks, boys.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Gymnastics Growth Show. Now, if you're an ambitious gymnastics coach with a hunger for self-improvement, check out my Gymnastics Growth Academy, where you'll find members from over 40 countries, all accessing my masterclasses, courses, templates, live community calls, exercise libraries, and so much more. It's a program that members have described as life-changing. So why don't you check it out for yourself? Head to gymnasticsgrowth.com to learn more. See you on the inside.